Welcome to Take a Pause with me, Varun. A while back, I spoke to Ankur Warikoo about a bunch of things, right? From productivity to finding clarity in life, balancing everything else, being able to say no, and so much more. I thought it'd be interesting to kind of drop the entire conversation in its entirety, like start to end, for you guys to consume in one shot. And so we're going to head into that. Before we go there, I want to make sure you hit subscribe and smash that bell icon and go straight to my chat with Ankur. I'm actually going to start this conversation by saying me and Ankur have had a conversation before on a podcast, which was just before he did 3, 2, 1 on his rocket ship that became what Ankur Warikoo is today. And I'm like, was I too early in getting Ankur Warikoo on a podcast? Did we speak too early about so many things? I've decided to have a chat with him to kind of kick off, take a pause, because I'm like, I've had to take a pause to digest everything that you're doing, Ankur. It's been incredible to see your journey, especially the last couple of years.
Yeah, thank you so much. Firstly, yeah, for having me back. It's such a joy. I'd say that you definitely then have an eye for picking up talent that is about to explode. So you clearly have a alternate career if you ever get bored of what you're doing right now. But the last 2 years have been very, very, very interesting and very gratifying in multiple ways. But I'm glad to speak about it and be back on the show.
Yeah, one of the things I want to start off by asking you is right is that to really be able to kind of do everything that you've done, especially across the content creator journey, and I kind of say that you're an entrepreneur creator because you've had an entrepreneurial journey. You treat your journey as a content creator as an entrepreneur. You call it a startup, uh, but I want to kind of go down deeper and say that where does the motivation come from? Where do you kind of, if you got to go deep down there and say, okay, this is what really motivates me to do what I do every morning, where does that really start from?
So you're right in that sense, Varun, that I am an entrepreneur at heart, and for the last decade, because I've built startups and more importantly, built organizations where very different kind of people come together and align themselves, hopefully, towards one common objective. That's a joy. I genuinely love building organizations and working with people and finding ways of navigating through that. And when this content creation journey happened, it was for me a blessing that the last 10 years were a training ground where I didn't take of this as, oh, let's have a flash in the pan
Mm.
viral stuff, let's do something which is crazy, let's do something which is going to get
Yeah.
us the eyeballs right away. But I was like, this is going to be a long term game and it needs to be process. So I think of creativity as a process, and I was like, let's get it done. But the question was, why would you
Yeah.
want to get it done? Like, what's in it for you? Like, why are you even doing it? Which is the question that you're asking. And there the thesis wasn't so clear when I started. I was experimenting just like I've experimented multiple times in my life, trying to figure out if there is an answer that emerges. And when I started to at least focus on that content creation journey, which was around March 2020, so slightly before when we last spoke, it was all across. I was like, hey, I have something to share, which is my years of experience and everything that's happened in my life. But I don't know who's going to appreciate it. And I don't know what are they going to appreciate it for. And that's what I have to figure out. So it's classic product building where you're not trying to sell what you've made, but you're trying to make what
Yeah.
people would buy. And I was just throwing things in the universe, whether it was on Instagram or on YouTube or on LinkedIn or on Twitter or on everywhere else. And suddenly I saw that of all the things that I was doing, where there were multiple signals coming in, there was a very strong signal coming in from 18 to
Mm.
24-year-olds, and specifically around three things. We have no idea how to manage our
Yeah.
money. We have no idea how to manage our careers. And we don't want to admit it, but we have no idea how to manage our lives. And it's getting really, really hard. And what I realized was this was the same thing that we also struggled with, you and I. But life was somewhat simpler back then because choices were quote unquote limited. And we were somewhat living in a very
Yeah.
small world where our school and our colony friends were at best the comparison set. Like, so Sharma ji ka beta, we knew that person. But today, Sharmaji's beta is this fictional character that exists on somewhere in the internet, whether it's a YouTuber making crores at the age of 12 or an Instagrammer making millions of dollars at the age of 9. And the comparison set has just exploded. It's the entire world. So what I realized was people are making choices in life out of
Mm,
ignorance and not awareness for no fault of theirs. And all that I wanted to do was just
mm,
make them aware. They ultimately will make the choices that they want to make, and they will learn their own way. But if it can come from a point of awareness, that works for me. So that's what I do. I think of myself
mm.
as a teacher who is just helping people become more aware in the choices that they make. And that's my sole driver. The manifestation of that will keep changing over years, but the why of this will remain, hopefully, the same.
You know, you make an interesting point, right? Is that when we try to share things that we've learned, there's a term I like to use, which is useless information. Because you've been told throughout our life, right? Ki this is useless. Like, why are you lying on the couch and watching MTV when you were a kid? Or why are you reading comics? Or why do you need to know what Mithun's dialogue in that movie was? And so on and so forth, right? I was a pop culture junkie growing up. I would always have these things at the back of my head, right? And always told ki it's utterly useless. There's no point, but you don't remember what you're taught in class, uh, which is, I think, a
Yeah.
problem we all suffered from. So, but if you look at it today, knowing that information and sharing it in so many ways is, I think it's also opened up in that sense. But I also see people struggling with saying, okay, do I share it naturally or do I manufacture it? So, what is innately your information to share is a struggle I see a lot of people kind of going through. So, when you're kind of putting down something and saying, okay, this is something which I really want to share, because people want to hear it, but it's also like from whatever I've consumed of your content, I know for a fact it's all genuine. It's like it's coming from what you've learned and not from, oh, somebody said, okay, this is what is trending or this is what everyone's talking about, let's jump onto this bandwagon. um, and that requires a certain balance. So how do you look at that balance kind of coming in?
A couple of things helped there, Varun. One is the fact that you're not in the same age group as the audience that you're speaking to. You're not also their parents' age. You're
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle, right? So you're in that sweet spot where you would be that bade
Ah.
bhaiya figure, where and you will find Manish speak about bade bhaiya a lot because Josh just
Yeah,
thrives on
yeah.
that bade bhaiya identity, and I see it why. So you will have that bade bhaiya figure where someone who's 25, 30, or perhaps even 20, 21, they would shy away from calling me uncle, but technically I am
Hmm.
uncle for them. But they would call me
Yeah,
Ankur bhaiya and sheepishly
yeah,
call me Ankur because I've
yeah.
said so. Don't call me sir or
Same
bhaiya,
here. Yeah, I
whatnot.
agree.
What they know is here is this person who's gone through life. But then the second part comes in. This person understands us because he has gone through the same shit that we went through and thus empathizes with what we are going through as against
Hmm.
being dismissive. So unfortunately what most parents do is यार तुम्हारे को तो इतना आसान मिला है हम जब तुम्हारी उम्र में थे तो कितनी फाइट मारते थे यहाँ जाते
चल
थे
के
वहां
स्कूल
जाते
जाते
थे
थे,
ये करते थे वो करते थे
all that stuff.
करेक्ट राइट लाइक हम 5 किलोमीटर चल के स्कूल जाते थे हम घर के कपड़े धोते थे हम दूध की बाल्टी पकड़ के आधा आधा घंटा मदर डेयरी के सामने खड़े होते थे तुम्हें तो ये सब कुछ मिला है तब भी तुम रो रहे हो दैट्स that's by the
Hmm.
way a reality, but it's also dismissive because it's not their fault that they were born in a world that took
Yeah.
care of them much better than their parents did. So I think the relatability plus the experience creates a very potent mix, which works, and most people would would not like. So I think in 2 by 2
Hmm.
matrices all the time, and think of that. X-axis is are you experienced yet?
Hmm.
No and yes. And are you
Hmm.
relatable? No and yes. Most people who are creating content, who are the Instagrammers or YouTubers, are people who they'll be able to
Hmm.
relate to, but they're not
True.
experienced yet. So they will take it at face value, but they will also be easily dismissive of it at face value if they're like, ये
Correct.
क्या बोल रहा है? Like this, इस इंसान को कोई आइडिया नहीं है कि वो क्या बोल रहा है, बट वो बोल रहा है क्योंकि किसी किताब में या नवल रविकांत ने
हाँ,
ये बोला था, and that's
exactly. Yeah.
it. And then there is this other end, which is our professors who are immensely experienced, but they're just not relatable. Like we just cannot have a conversation with them. And being in that sweet spot where you're both experienced and relatable, that's a hard one to do. But once it's done, I think it works magic. At least I can stand testimony to
You know,
that.
you spoke about being younger, and I'm struggling with, not struggling. I call myself a midlife crisis creator. I don't know if I can pull you into that same container or other category in that sense. But when you were younger, if you kind of think about, was there a specific point when was that? What are the best advice you got when you were younger? Right? 'Cause in many ways, I know, I know that the content veers towards advice in terms of uh, what someone like you puts out, but when you were younger, there was no one like you putting stuff out because there was no Instagram or YouTube. What was the best advice you got when you were younger, which you kind of used through the years?
I think I got most of my advices rather late in life, if I were to say 20s
Hmm.
to be late. Growing up, frankly, I did not have very sound advice coming in from
Hmm.
any corner. There was encouragement. People used to support me because I was like this above average, very diligent, very discerning kid, very respectful of elders, like the classic "acha sa bacha," doing nothing wrong. So there was a lot of admiration and there was a lot of encouragement with matched with my ambition, and I don't know where I got it from, but ambition to the extent of being audacious was something that was really helpful. And I think one big event in my life was dropping out of
Yeah,
my PhD and coming back to India, which made me realize, and this was not something that someone told me, but I realized it on my own, and I'm glad I did, was that what you're good at doesn't necessarily make you happy.
so true.
So what you're good at and what makes you happy could be two very different things. And the world will have you believe that if you're good at something, that's the only thing you should do because it will automatically make you happy. But that's not true. It isn't true and it necessarily wouldn't be true. So you have to find the intersection of what you're good at and what makes you happy. A lot of people in the world are living lives where they're good at something, maybe their work, maybe their relationship and whatnot, but it doesn't inherently make them happy. But they'll trick themselves into believing that that's what they ought
Hmm.
to be doing because someday they will get happy doing that. And I think one of the best advices that I did have come from somebody else was my first manager after my MBA school. I was a consultant, and my first project, Varun, was a project for a real estate company where I had to create the financial projections for the real
Okay.
estate company. And I sucked at accounting. I hated accounting. I had no idea why accountants were even born or accounting as a subject was introduced in the world. तो मुझे सर पैर नहीं है कि credit debit क्या होता है. I barely passed the exam in the MBA school, and I, not surprisingly, was a disaster in
Hmm.
that project. I would do something half-heartedly, and my expectation was if I make a mistake, my manager will pick that mistake up,
Yeah,
point it to me, I will fix it like the discerning, diligent kid, and the world will be
correct.
happy. And that kept happening. I made mistakes, he fixed it. I made mistakes, he fixed it. He was very patient with me. And then on this one on one call, he said, which has just stayed with me all my life, he said, Ankur, if I can't trust you, it doesn't matter how smart you are.
So true.
And that hit like nothing else did because, like, oh shit, now it makes sense. He's like, I can't trust you. Like, whatever work you put out, I can't trust you. I have to look at it to make sure it is error free. And that means you bringing me down to your level and not allowing me to scale up to a higher level. And that will never work, irrespective of how smart you are or how well intentioned you are. And I think that has stayed with me, especially in the Indian context where operating with trust and building something which is trust first has become
Yeah.
sacrosanct. And I use that, as crazy as it sounds, in the entire content game that I played the last 2 years, which we may want to discuss if we want to. And it's worked fabulously well. But yeah, those one advice that I figured for myself, one advice that I was thankfully given, that'd be my early advice.
You speak about trust, right? And I think that's an important fact. And you mentioned it. Your creator journey has almost had, like, I wouldn't say popular, but I would say every creator that who kind of resonates with an audience has one fundamental thing. So they have a few foundational layers, right? One of the layers you have is trust, because people genuinely trust what you're telling them, that you're coming from a place, like you said, you're coming from experience, and they're still connecting with you as a human being. So as you look at that trust kind of coming into it, how did you kind of, if you look at how you started off, I remember your LinkedIn content. I was a early consumer of your LinkedIn content. So I've actually seen that transition from how you initially were creating content, before obviously kind of scale out all of these things. But I think some things have been consistent, that you always spoken about something that was inherently coming naturally to you, putting it out in the way it was coming.
Yeah.
The fact that you don't edit out, is one thing which I've noticed. As someone who worked in video production for a large part of his career, I'm like, this part could have been maybe edited out, but I let that go because I think that's the way you genuinely are. So how have you looked at trust, especially with an audience? Like when you look at that entire trust piece kind of coming in, what are your almost like things to tick off to make sure that trust is always there?
As I said, trust is, and I'm so glad that you see it. It seems to me then it's somewhat not hidden behind, but somewhat obvious. Trust is one of the strongest foundations of not just this content play, but the way that I live life. I start with trust. So I trust people before I need to evaluate them. And I would always do things that will allow people to trust me over time, if not immediately. And when I started building the content game, again, the idea was how do you make it not just into something that you enjoy doing, but something that can also become a career, a profession, and eventually some sort of a enterprise which can grow by itself. And it's not a charitable enterprise; it's a for-profit enterprise that makes it happen for people. And the idea was when you're building this community, you have two options always. You either build this community to sell something, or you build this community to
Mm.
generate trust. And I was very clear from day one that we are always going to build this community for generating trust. What does that mean? That means that everything that I share will be authentic and will come from my own life experiences. There'll be fumbles, and I will just
Yeah.
let them be. There will be things that I will say which may not be politically correct, but I'll just let them be because they're my views. I will make mistakes, and if they go out, I will admit to them first up. There will be people who will troll me, call me out, and I'll always be respectful. My content will never try to gain at someone else's expense, whether it's making fun of them or rejecting them or dismissing them. I do make a lot of fun about fixed deposits, but I think that that is a little factual and not something which is subjective. And and those were the components of it. And if this does work, which was a big question mark when we started, but if this does work, then at no point of time will I ever
Mm.
sell something. Definitely not something that I want people to buy of my own. So I may work with a brand and introduce them, and that'll only be brands that I
Yeah.
personally use. So I made some classic mistakes early on where, for the chase of money, let's just work with brands because it's happy, nice money. And then when I quickly realized I was going against what I wanted to do, so I backstrapped and I said, no, we're only and only going to work with brands that I personally use or whose founders I am personally friends with, because then I have known them for years and I can
Yeah.
vouch for that, and just see where that goes. And that helped because when I started, which was the first test of building this as an enterprise, I started my entire marketing funnel, which was ads on Google and Facebook and wherever else, which are fairly aggressive and a lot of people are annoyed by it. The way that it works is those are the ones that are creating this distribution that I want to reach out to. And when they see those ads, they most likely do not know of me because I'm not an important entity. In that cocoon of ours,
Yeah.
we may know each other, but the broader world does not care two hoots about Ankur Warikoo. But when they see that ad and they question, who is this guy? And they go look me up, they'll just see years and years and years of authentic content without ever trying to sell anything to them. And that was the machinery that I wanted to build. And it's worked. It's worked beyond my wildest beliefs. And thus, in some way, validates the confirmation bias that I started with.
You mentioned confirmation bias. I'm a person who loves to pick. I don't know why we all enjoy psychology, neuroscience, and psychology terms a lot more now. I'm like, I wish they taught it this way when we were in school or college. The same way how I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said if they taught us chemistry like how he's recently learned how to make cocktails, he said we would have been a lot more interested to look at it. But I feel that there's so much about learning that is inherently like what we really enjoy, but also like we tend to conform towards, okay, this is what how it's done, so let's just do this, everyone's doing this anyway. I remember the first time I interacted with you, I actually we didn't meet backstage. We did a TEDx talk in the same venue. I think there was one in Bandra. There was you, there was me, there was Nikhil Taneja, there were a bunch of others, and that's the first time I think we were in the same space. And I remember for a long time, and you still do. You spoke a lot about failure at that point, and I remember one of the pieces which is so refreshing about your content then was that you were talking about failures at that point, and nobody was talking about failures. I want to kind of go back to that, and I'm going to go back to go to one point which you wrote in your book, which I have lying here next to me with some pieces kind of bookmarked here, and you talk about the fact that, yeah, saying when you want to make tough decisions in life, ask yourself what's the worst that can happen. And it's something which I truly believe in, right? It's literally the first chapter of my book as well, which kind of talks about that. So I want you to kind of elaborate on that, and I'd love to kind of go back and forth and saying what that kind of means for you. And in many ways, I want to see how that reflects on what I kind of look at it as.
When I was reading this book, I was like, oh, thank God someone's picked up this page and written an entire thesis of it, because I clearly did such a piss poor job of just throwing it out and saying, समझ लो जो समझना है मैंने बोल दिया जो मुझे बोलना था. So it's like I I was like I hope this lands well. But the idea of this has been, again, going back to the phase where I came back to India from the US, was when I used this mental model for the first time in my life. I realized that I was good at something that I was doing, and because of that, success as measured by society was coming in rather easy. I was top of my class. I was like fast track, 100% scholarship, all that's nice, happy things. But there was no mojo, there was no vibe, that hum that I thought I would experience, that I was clearly not experiencing. So when I decided to come back, the big question that I asked myself was not, hey, what will I do if this is not what I do? I was like, I want to make the decision of coming back to India and dropping out of my PhD. But if I do that, what's the worst thing that will happen? And I found myself saying, hey, I am fairly certain I will get a job. It won't be the best job. It won't be the job that will make me compare myself with my college and schoolmates and high five with them. But I am fairly certain I'm never going to die of poverty and hunger. Like, I'm not going to struggle to
Yeah.
survive as much as my parents did. My struggle would be, can I make it in life beyond the orbit that I was born in? But I am frankly not going back in a manner where it's a disaster. I was lucky that I was on a scholarship, so I hadn't even spent my own money. There was no loan that I had taken, nothing whatsoever, right? So this was frankly a decision which had no worst case scenario in the true sense of it. While there was a worst case scenario, I was completely
Mm.
comfortable with it. And that's the same thing that happened when I got through ISB and I had to take that massive loan for the first time. It's the same thing that happened when I quit my consulting job to become an entrepreneur. It's the same thing that happened when I decided to approach Groupon to buy out Groupon India. It's the same thing that happened when I quit Nearby to go on my own and start all over again. I keep asking the same questions. What's the worst thing that will happen? And will I be okay dealing with it? And it was, I think, about 2014 or 2015. I read this book, which is a fascinating book that I would strongly recommend to people around their 30s, not earlier because it may not land well then. And the book's called A Guide to Good Life. And it's a book on Stoicism. It's a very simple introduction to Stoic philosophy, which is a very ancient Roman philosophy. And when I read that, there is an entire thesis of Stoicism which rests on something called the worst case
Mm.
visualization. And Stoics are meant to visualize their death every single day to be able to appreciate what they have in life. And when I read that, I'm like, whoa, there is actually merit for what I had been experiencing and using all my life. High five. And it's just stayed with me ever since. And I think most people are paralyzed by taking decisions and are fearful of taking the decisions because they are constantly asking themselves whether this will elevate me to the next orbit, which may or may not happen. And frankly, you'll never get to know that answer before you make that decision. But if you were to just optimize for the worst case scenario and be okay with that, you will gather a lot more courage than you think you have within you.
No, I'm stopping myself from having a wide grin because you mentioned stoicism. I believe I survived the last 2 years because I discovered stoicism about 3 years ago, through Ryan Holiday's books primarily, because I mean, I follow a lot of his
Yes.
content. Then went and bought meditations. Then went down like the rabbit hole of all things there. Um, the one thing from stoicism for me has been that focus on the things that you can control, and not on everything that you can't. I think especially in times like I can't believe I'm doing this. I've mentioned before we started. I will not mention the times that I've been over the last 2 years, but in this context, I will mention it. It's made so much sense because you cannot control everything. You can't control every outcome. You can only focus on what you can do, um, and and I feel that's been one of the best things that I've learned. It's kind of changed the way I look at the world, the way I look at life. Um, and even what you just mentioned about just like kind of mapping it out, saying what's the worst that will happen, put it down there, and I'm finding more and more things that you and I can kind of align and chat on, even post recording podcast things, because we literally say, okay, both of us wrote about worst case scenario, both of us read stoicism, so there's a lot here to kind of unpack. But for me, what was most interesting about what you said is the fact that at every stage you're saying that you look at a worst case scenario and take a choice basis that, and then the choice goes sideways, then you figure out worst case scenario and move on from there, right? I think we often get stuck at that point of,
Correct.
oh, I don't know what to do, so I won't move ahead. And I'm sure you had many of those moments in life. So when you're finding yourself stuck, are you just mapping the worst case scenario, or are you also like, is there something you kind of tell yourself to say, okay, no, you need to move ahead, you can't just be static, you can't be stuck here? What do you kind of tell yourself?
Now, as crazy as it may sound, and I don't want to come across as someone who is a know-it-all, I have never genuinely felt stuck in my life, and I've said this often. If there's any person in your life that makes you believe that
Hmm,
you're stuck, that person is your enemy. And unfortunately, for most people, that person is they
exactly.
themselves. And I don't think anybody is stuck in life. Like you can always take the smallest step possible to get you out of that spot. Yes, there may be obstacles on the way, there may be disappointments on the way, there will be failures on the way, there will be disagreements, there will be misalignments, but that's not feeling stuck. That's not believing that you're stuck. You always have a choice. You always have a choice. You're just scared to make that choice. So I've had my moments, several moments where I have been dejected, where I have failed, where I have felt like a loser, where I have felt like an imposter. But at all points of time, I've never felt stuck, and I've always somehow known that I can get out of this. It's just a matter of time, and definitely a matter of my will inside. And then just that makes me move forward. So it's not a helpful response,
No,
but
I think
it is
that's
what it
also
is.
good to kind of know. I've been stuck many times in life. I've been my own worst enemy for I think way too long at least in my 20s. I feel that I've aged better in my head. I hope is my honest thought most times. But there's something you just said, right? Is that also times when you feel like an imposter. You feel, I think there are enough negative things we put into our own mind, which in many ways clouds what we could actually do. I mean, the world might not even care, right? Like we all have that spotlight effect. I'm walking into a room, everybody's looking at me, everybody's noticing what I'm doing. Nobody cares. They're doing their own thing, right? So how do you kind of deal with negative thoughts when you feeling negativity within yourself, not from the outside? I think the outside there's way too much of that happening. But how do you kind of deal with negativity within yourself? And actually, then we'll kind of maybe also ask you to kind of dip into how do you deal with people externally who are negative as well towards you.
The big thing is to genuinely surround yourself with positivity, whether it's positive ideas, whether it's positive people, whether it's positive emotions. That's a prerequisite, because it's really hard for someone who's an alcoholic to not have the desire to drink if they're surrounded
Yeah.
by alcohol. It's like motivation is garbage, as Mel Robbins wonderfully says. It is garbage, and we rely on it far too much than it's helpful for. So that's number one. But number two, the negative thoughts for me, I wouldn't want to dismiss them or control them. So what meditation has really taught me in the last 5 6 years is you can't control your emotions. You can only be aware of them. And if you do a good job of being aware of your emotions, you will find them as just another car passing by as you stand on the roadside observing it. And that's just it. Those are your thoughts. They will just move by. You will notice them. Hey, that's a Maruti, that's a Wagoner, that is a Honda, that's a whatever it is. It's blue, it's black, it's white, it's whatnot. It's driving fast, it's driving slow, it's stopping, it has someone inside. But you don't possess that car and take it with you. You
Yeah.
just let it go. You just let it go. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned from motivation, that my negative thoughts are like weather. It is bad weather right now. It's eventually going to fade away. And all that I need to do is just be cognizantly aware of what is it that I'm feeling. Like, be acutely aware of what is it that I'm feeling, whether it's fear, whether it's anger, whether it's jealousy, whether it's anything. Because the minute I do that, I think the years of meditation has helped, that the point of awareness of an emotion is also the point of disappearance of that emotion for me. And and then there's just that moment of, not clarity, but that moment of balance. And then I can bring my quote unquote positive self in and say, okay, let's take the smallest step to get us out of this situation.
You mentioned meditation earlier, and oftentimes we see lives today are packed with so many things, right? Like, I haven't used Calendly till you sent me that link the other day, and I was like, "Okay, I finally should get onto Calendly. Why don't I do that myself?" Right? Because I'm this person who has four different calendars and trying to sync them all together at all times. I'm trying to simplify life. One of the things which I've realized is we pack so much into our day. And I remember watching a video which you put out about how you manage your time, and I looked at how you literally ran through your entire Google Calendar and was showing people how you use every period of times. But how do you kind of, if you have to define the way you bring balance in your time, saying there's certain amount of time for work, there's certain amount of time for life, there has to be time for self, because if you don't have time for self, then everything else suffers. How do you kind of look at those three buckets and kind of bring them some sort of balance?
The trick there, Varun, and while I have a lot more control over my time right now, that wasn't the case, let's say 2 years back, right? So for a decade, I just lived life on a calendar, intensely packed and so on. And I struggled with it, despite being a very good time management. I pride myself for how I manage my time, and I believe that I do a fairly good job, at least for myself. It works immaculately well. But I struggled because I was just constantly context switching. I was like, okay, there's a marketing conversation right now, then there's a sales conversation right now, then I don't have time for myself, then I've just become a father, then I am this and I'm that, and it's just like, whoa, everything coming in. And at that point of time, I tried something else which really worked for me, which is something that I fully endorse now. The problem with managing different identities and thus different contexts is our brains do a very poor job of
Yeah.
switching context, really poor job of switching context. And it's not hardwired to switch context. For years, we've been doing one thing for hours and hours. And now, suddenly, when we're in this world where everything is happening at the speed of thought, our mind's struggling. And that's what creates that chaos. That's what also creates procrastination. It creates anxiety and everything else attached to it. So, what you have to do, or at least what I thought I should do, is give myself and my mind the time to breathe in into something and let it immerse itself in that for a period of time. And just do that and nothing else. So, what I mean by that is, most people try to fit in their day with everything they have to do. What I shifted was, no, I have to fit my week into everything that I
Hmm.
have to do. I don't think there is anything that I'm doing in life which cannot have a weekly cadence. And if I can get to a weekly cadence, then I'm going to bucket my week in things that I want to do, which means it is possible that Monday to Friday, I will actually not have any time given to
Yeah.
myself. But Saturday will be the time I do nothing but devote myself to myself. And that's when I will do things that I want to. And that will be my recharge. And on Monday, I will only pick up
Hmm.
book writing. And on Tuesday, I will only pick up content creation. And on Wednesday, I'll only pick up external meetings. And on Thursday, I'll only pick up hiring. And on Friday, I'll only pick up research. And on Saturday, it will be me time. On Sunday, it will be family time. And you let the world be known of this. You let your own mind be known of this. And then at least I was surprised at how easily I got into the flow and how my mind was so much more productive and I could achieve so much more, both with the anticipation of this is to
Yeah.
follow, like on Saturday I will do this and on Friday I will do this, as against the context switching where I felt busy, but I frankly wasn't productive at all.
I think oftentimes we also fall into this trap because we don't. When someone says, "Okay, I just want to do a call, it'll take 10 minutes," you suddenly slot that into your day. Someone else will say, "There's an opportunity for when a brand wants to talk to you," or there's so many of these things which are I was reading somewhere that we often spend a lot of our time doing things which seem cool or seem really important, but they actually keep us away from things which are important to us in life. The way you just spoke about structuring your week, how long did it take you to convince everybody else around that this is how you function? Because the worry also is, I think I have a feeling it's an Indian thing as well. We worry about pissing people off way too much, saying, "Ye bura man jayenge," right? It's sort of like you can't say no. Like literally, like half the time, like I'll tell someone, "Don't share my phone number unless I know context." But they'll share it saying, "No, how could I say I cannot? I have your number, so I have to share it." Right? It's as simple as that. Like almost basic thing like that. But how did you kind of approach that part, or were you like, did you have prior practice in being able to say no better?
uh, no, I for the longest time, I know, I think till about 27, 28, I was a obsessive
Yeah,
people pleaser. And all my entire identity was, how much do
yeah,
people like me? And that was not a cool life
not
to
at all.
live at all, because I was constantly in the pressure. I was constantly asking myself, oh, why do they not like me? Why do they like me? Blah 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 blah. And then slowly and gradually I made that shift. So saying no now comes very naturally, and I think I do a polite job of it, because all that I hear is, yeah, we respect that, as against, screw you, asshole, who do you think you are? but uh, but I think the bigger question that you're asking is, how do you orient the world to how
Yeah.
you want to do things at your own end? And the truth is, you can't. That's it. You really can't. You have to get to a point where you either give them that choice, or you bear the consequences of them making the choice that is not in your favor, and you being okay with that, because there is a bigger, larger goal that you're working towards. So when I did this, I clearly had to say no to a lot of things. Like, for example, I get up really early in the morning, and because of that, I sleep at 9, 9:30 every day. And thankfully, I have a wife that also sleeps at
Mm,
9, 9:30 every day. We have kids who go to bed at 8
yeah.
every day. So that is nicely orchestrated. But it does mean that I can't, not I can't, I don't want to go to social dinners and events and hobnob with startup entrepreneurs and go and, say, oh my God, I love you, and oh, what would I be without you, blah blah blah. I don't do all of that, and that does mean that I'm saying no to a lot of things that a lot of other people who are my peers or my own ecosystem would be. But I'm totally okay with it, because I know that the value and the benefit that I derive from sleeping early and getting up early is far, 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 far greater than me spending time on dinners that frankly would just make me
Mm.
look cool and sound cool, but are not adding anything. So I don't think you can orient the world to how you want to live life. You just have to make a call of, this is how I want to live my life. This is why I want to live my life the way I want to live it. And now I have just to figure out who is in and who is out.
Do you see that almost orienting your time this way, right? The sleeping part, my house, everybody is passed out by 8:30 as well. But I am that person who's awake till 10:30 because I'm like, this is my me time. I have those, between I think 8:39 to 10:30, I am just reading what I want to read. Um, I occasionally get suckered into going on a Twitter space. I rarely do that. But I'm like, I don't want to talk. I spend my day talking. I don't want to talk at night. Right. But I'm saying, no, no, engagement is very high in the night. Like, no, no, I'm sleeping. I'm reading. I'm not talking right now. Right. I think the only talking at that point is talk to my parents. But especially when you kind of build this system in life, it often feels to the world that you're very rigid. But I feel that what really comes across is that you know what you value in your time, right? You value the fact that if you sleep early, you wake up early, you wake up fresher, you perform better in life, and everything that you really want to do. But have you seen that there is a flexibility that you build into it, so that, okay, I'll still perform the way I want to, but when I do want, like, I know for a fact, you, like, Fridays, I know that you do an Instagram live which goes a little later. So when you build those things into it, and I become a performance junkie in recent times, as my liking towards fitness as an area of focus, at again midlife crisis, totally everything, content creator, fitness enthusiast, everything is happening. Next thing I'll be talking about is male grooming products. I'm getting there, I'm almost there now. But I feel that the interesting part is that once you kind of have these areas of interest, especially in terms of performance, and I think we talk about that a lot more these days, what do you think makes you perform better as an individual? Because you have so much going on, you figuring balance in life. You also, and as anybody who has kids, I know that that is something which is it's amazing, but it's also high energy extracting, right? So how do you kind of make sure you perform at optimal levels?
It goes back to the fact that you have to do things for yourself in your day slash week that give you the energy that you need to dispense on things that you have to do. There is no way out. Like it's a simple energy transfer mechanism where energy will never get destroyed, it will only get transferred. And as a as a physics student, it's just so fundamental to your existence that there is no other way that you
Hmm.
would see it. So for me, it is all about I have to get energy from somewhere else. And those will be through things that I love doing, whether it's reading, whether it's meditating, whether it's thinking, whether it's working out, whether it's spending time with family, whether it's traveling, whether it's anything of that. And then I will dispense energy on things that I have to spend it on. And those will be social gatherings and interviews and whatnot. Like this conversation for me is
Hmm.
energy gathering because I am getting to think about something that I haven't thought of. And all kudos to you because you're getting me to do that. But if this was any other, okay, tell us about your growing
Yeah.
up years, tell us why you went to the US, tell us why you came back, how old are you, what are
Yeah.
your kids like, then it's like, dude, no, you didn't need
Yeah.
me to answer these questions because that's literally what I do for a
Yeah.
living right now. It's all there out.
This interview could have been an email. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, and not even that. I'm not going to spend my time answering questions that I've
Yeah.
already answered for the last 10 years of my life. So it's I'm blessed that I'm actually doing things more often than not that give me energy. Like I can truly count on my fingers the things that I would have done in the last week that sucked energy
Hmm.
out of. And my only objective then is to minimize them or to eliminate them. And I keep telling this to everyone in my team and my wife that don't drag me into things that require energy. And even if we have to, because we're living in a practical world, then you have to tell me in advance because then I will have to bring that energy level within me by doing things that I have to do to be able to dispense it. Yeah, that's just it. But right now, like I can go on and on. Like yeah, Mondays is when I shoot, and this is a great example of that. So of what I was saying of
Yeah.
blocking my time. So all the content that you see on social media, which is around 63 pieces of unique content across 5 platforms, all of that gets created in a 4 hour stretch at my end on a Monday afternoon. That's what I do. From 2 to 6, I sit down and I get into that zone and I shoot my YouTube videos, my Instagram reels, my YouTube shorts, my newsletter, my podcast. Everything gets done in that
Yeah.
4 hour slot. We're going for an offsite in March, and that week is when I don't expect anybody to work, including me. So I had to shoot for that
Yeah.
week as well. So on this Monday that went by, I entered this studio of mine at 2 p.m. and I was shooting till 10. And I was back to back researching, shooting, cutting, researching, shooting, cutting. And at 10, I felt like I could do this for another 8 hours because there was no part of me that
Hmm.
felt tired. I was just so in the zone and so high on energy because I was doing something that I thoroughly enjoy, which is such a blessing. And unfortunately, most people don't have it in their lives. So I feel that managing time then becomes a natural byproduct if you have already managed your energy.
You almost quoted the T-shirt I'm wearing, which is "When in doubt, start with what you love," because you enjoy doing it so much. And I agree with you entirely. If you enjoy doing something so much, I remember a while back I was talking to Tanmay on my on the other podcast, and he said that he asked me a question. He said, "What would you do for no money for the rest of your life?" And I would say I would have conversations, be it podcast, be it anything else. I want to just have conversations. I think that's innately it, right? If you, eventually you find that fundamental thing which you really enjoy doing, time kind of slips away. You get into that. It's almost like when you watch that super slow mo I go back to the Matrix in that sense, and Matrix is finally relevant again because another edition came out, so no longer like, oh, what was that movie? But it's almost that you have that feeling of just you getting into the zone, and kind of performing, and doing everything that you're doing. What I also find fascinating is that you're creating all this content in such a compact amount of time. Do you find yourself even within that, figuring out a way to switch from one to the other? Because I'm gathering the way you would do your YouTube versus how, let's say, a reel kind of goes, or even how a podcast goes, all flow differently, different pace. You kind of put things out differently. How do you switch from one format to the other?
That took some time to get used to, but once I got used to it, it became an easy switch in my mind. I frankly don't have an answer to that question. It's a terrific question, but in my head, it's there on the notes. Like, I'm a sucker for pen and
Same
paper,
here.
so I just write it down. This is what I have to do. I'll get it done quickly, quickly, quickly. Take a maximum 15-20 minute break, and that's it. Just switch my mind to say, okay, Instagram reels now, a different frame, and I'm like, I'm this as
Yeah.
against this, and I'm slower with my hands, and then and podcast where I'm literally speaking to this person, like
Yeah.
this is the person that I'm
Yeah.
speaking to, and not the screen or anybody else. But I think it took some time to get used to, but now the switch happens, and I understand why.
Do you think it happened because you added on formats? And I remember initially it was YouTube, and then you added on, let's say, I think the reels kind of scaled up at a point, podcast happened later. So I always kind of turn to people and saying, don't do everything on day one. Like, do one thing, then add on
Yeah,
another. Do you think that could be it?
absolutely. I think that nice happy transition really helped, and to the point, because I have a story around this. So I got an email from a merch company saying, hey, when are you
Yeah.
launching your merch? And I think we'll do a good job of it, we understand, blah 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, we launch merch when we are 5 million
Hmm.
on Instagram. I says, great, let's have a conversation next month. I like, dude, I'm going to hit 5 million in 3 years, so let's talk in 3 years. And that's just it. Like, I'm in no hurry, and all of these plans, they don't have to happen today. They don't have to happen today. There is a time and space for everything, and you have to pace yourself out. Make sure that you are the capability and the resources to deploy it. And once you do, then it's just a matter of when.
I have to pick another line from another piece from your book, right? Where you say that you don't find your passion, you grow your passion. How do you feel you've grown your passion? Because I know that there are things that have kind of extended and scaled from what you started, but how have you kind of grown it? If you had to say, okay, this was the seed, now this is the now it's a jungle. How has that? How
Yeah.
did that kind of process kind of work?
So before I answer the question, the real question is, what is my passion? And what I think my passion is right now is teaching. Like, I love teaching, and I now figure that I have always loved teaching. It has been something very innate to me, maybe because I saw my mom, who was a teacher all her life, and I saw the impact that she could create and the patience with which she delivered, and so on. So I remember in school helping kids, because I was like the helpful and the above average kid. Then in the US, I had this teaching assistantship, so I taught different cultures for the first time. I understood where I do well and not. At MBA school, I was teaching my fellow students. Consultants, I was teaching my juniors, whatever the case may be. And then entrepreneurship in general, being a founder, teaches you a lot on how to be an effective teacher. Because if you do a good job of that, you succeed. If you don't, you are just one horrible leader. And this was not about me concluding at the age of 22 that, oh, teaching is my passion and now I'm going to do everything about it. I realized over almost 20 years that teaching is something that gives me joy, that gives me immense contentment, that gives me immense fulfillment. And I also think I do a good job of that. So today, I have just spent 20 years of my life growing and honing this skill of mine without realizing it's going to become a income stream or a career or my profession. And I am where I am right now. And it goes back to the same thing that a lot of people often ask me, hey, we really like the way you speak and the way you storytell and the way you emote. What can we do to get to that point? It's like, dude, I haven't done anything. Just spend 20 years on it. You will get where I am. You'll be possibly better than I am. So there is no overnight miracle or doors that you can get to make you that successful. Everybody knows it, but nobody believes it. And that's the same thing that I figured as well. I think most people just over index on finding their passion as early in their life because that's what they're told they need to do. But I feel finding the passion is wrong. Growing your passion is a journey. It may happen in 5 years, it may happen in 15, in 20, but when it happens, you will be so in the zone that you will be blown away by the ease with which you conduct yourself and how.
You know, I know that you're a huge fan of Atomic Habits as a book. I've seen that across your content, and I was listening to an interview of James Clear with Brené Brown, and she was fanboying on one line, which is that if I'm quoting it correctly, don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, or if I'm getting it right. But what you spoke
Yes,
about is just that you need to build a system for yourself. You need to keep doing it day in and day out, and eventually, because at some point the problem is we say, okay, I want to hit a certain number, or I want to do, oh, I want to make myself a public speaker, but rather than saying that, I'm just saying that I just want to be a good, I want to speak every day. It's like I want to write every day if I want to eventually
exactly.
publish a book and do everything else like that. So I feel that it kind of goes back to that. And in a weird segue, I want to ask you something, because I noticed one thing in your book which I haven't noticed as much in your content, which is the fact that you often talk about, you don't talk about being a father as much in your content. I'm very passionate about asking
Yes.
anybody who's a father, saying how they look at being a father as a fundamental part of themselves, because I've also heard too many young people talk about, oh, I don't think I'm ready to get married or have kids because I have too much to do. And I'm like, what are you doing it for? Which is where I kind of come down to. But what does, like, being married, having like a, I call it a partnership, having a partnership with someone, kind of having kids, how does that fit into just like how you look at it?
I think the biggest difference between who I was before we had kids and now, Varun,
Lack of sleep.
is my
I said lack of
sorry.
sleep.
No, I have to admit, and touch wood, but they're beyond that age. We have angels as
No,
kids, like genuine angels as kids. Like they never troubled us for sleep. They never troubled us for food or anything like that. So I think we just lucked out.
I haven't slept properly in 4.5 years, so which is just me talking.
No, I do not know what it is to be you, as you would not know what it is to be me. But it's just it's wonderful. I think the biggest thing that it taught me was how do you teach someone the fundamentals of life from a point of view that you find so easy to comprehend. I said something very complicated, but let me start again. It's the same problem people have when they're trying to look for
Mm,
mentors. So when I ask people, hey, you're looking for a mentor? Yes. Who are you looking for? And they're like, they will name the most successful
they know.
people in their space. Like, do you realize that that person is so far away from where you are that things which are so obvious to them will not even strike you? So when they will say it, you will feel like the dumb one for not getting it. And that will just crush you forever. And that's why finding mentors who are very far away and very successful from you is a bad thing. And that's something which is contrary to popular culture, but that's what I say. And I feel that parents and kids are pretty much the same, where parents have to now go through those 25, 30, 35 years of their life that they have had before they became a parent, and now speak to someone who's figuring shit out from day one. And it's not going to be easy because you will throw your biases in, you will throw your whatever is it that is a prejudice in your life at them and expect them to get it, but they won't. So all that will happen is either they will grow up to become you and your
Mm,
biases, or they will grow up to become independent thinkers. And each of these is a very,
mm,
very different outcome, and a dramatically different one. So I am constantly blown away by how much my wife and I will go on to influence, if we do it the right way, the lives of two kids who were just born in this world. Like it's
yeah,
crazy. And it is crazy how parenting is perhaps the most critical job
yeah,
in the world that no one is
yeah,
trained for. Like
yeah.
literally no one is trained for. Everyone learns on the job. It's the biggest fallout of this civilization of ours. Like, we did such a piss poor job of training parents and telling them what is it
Yeah,
that they're signing up for.
there is no manual for that. Definitely, I can kind of go on and on, but I want to kind of leave something for a way that I can bring you back to this show at some point of time. I think there's so much more you and I can talk about. But I gave myself a limit saying I will not let any episode go beyond an hour, because otherwise you're going into extremely extended territory. So I want to kind of close up by asking you one thing: is that when you are kind of taking a pause in your week, in your day, at any point of time, and it's in many ways taking a pause is actually a conversation you have with yourself, right? Because you taking that moment to kind of zone out the world and look at it. What do you often tell yourself? What do you kind of tell yourself when you are taking that moment? Let's say it's before you're getting into a meeting, before you're getting into recording your content, at specific points of time when you're taking that, what do you often tell yourself?
Don't take yourself too seriously. You're a non-entity. If you don't exist tomorrow, nobody's going to feel any difference. You're doing this because you enjoy it. Be grateful that people also like it, but you are not in any way meaningful. And that's what I keep telling myself. That's what I keep telling my team. That's what I keep telling my entire world. I genuinely, like, it. I'm not saying this because it's a nice thing to say. I mean it, Varun, when I say it. I am amazed at how many people give me way more importance than I deserve. Because in my head, I'm just the same guy. Like, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. I've been doing this for 16 years now. Like, I've been writing a blog for
Yeah.
16 years. My YouTube channel has been on for 5 years. And all of this seems like happened in the last 1 to 1.5 years. But yes, the success has come through. But my consistency of doing it has not altered. And I see people changing in their association with me. They treat me differently. They look at me differently. Their reasons for being friends with me is different. But in my head, like, dude, like, we're from school, boss. Like, you don't have to give me this respect. I'm that same gada that you hung out with in school. I haven't changed. I'm exactly the same person. So that's what I keep telling myself. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Thanks for that, Anko. Thanks for doing this. We definitely have to do like maybe a part two or a part three on this one, which is why I kind of left it. In true, I would say YouTube style, you left it, let people wanting more. Is the way I thought I will kind of end this one off. But thanks enough for coming on the show, and I must say that I've enjoyed taking a pause and having this conversation with you, in between my day, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
No, I thoroughly did. Yeah. Thank you for your very thoughtful questions. I always admire how well you put them across and how much you get the others to think about them. So I really enjoyed my time. Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that chat with Ankur. We're going to be dropping a bunch of the older conversations we've done in the past, which we feel are super relevant for all of you all to consume today in their full form on this channel. So make sure you hit subscribe and smash that bell icon. Got a lot more coming up on this channel on Take a Pause with me, Varun.